Welcome back to our channel, dear viewers. Today is a beautiful, bright day, and we are absolutely thrilled to sit down with you once again to dive deep into the intricate, ever-evolving world of Port Charles. As a longtime observer of the complex human tapestry that makes up General Hospital, I often find myself reflecting on how physical spaces in Port Charles are rarely just walls and a roof. They are repositories of memories, sanctuaries for the weary, and sometimes the very battlegrounds where the most bitter wars are fought. Recently, we have witnessed a profoundly distressing and emotionally charged confrontation that centers entirely around such a space, the late beloved Bobby Spencer's apartment. For those of us who have followed this saga for decades, Bobby represented a beacon of tough love, redemption, and open-hearted generosity. Her home was a reflection of her spirit. Yet, in the wake of her absence, that sanctuary has been transformed into a weapon in the ongoing, deeply entrenched feud between Carly and Britt Westbourne. The recent events surrounding this apartment are not merely a dispute over real estate, they are a devastating psychological dismantling of a woman who was already standing on the precipice of ruin. The inciting incident of this current tragedy is as cold as it is calculated. Britt, returning to what she believed was her safe haven, discovered that the locks on Bobby's apartment had been changed. The sheer panic and profound sense of displacement that must have washed over her in that moment is almost palpable. Carly, exercising a ruthless pragmatism that we have seen from her time and time again, did not just lock Britt out, she actively replaced her, renting the space to a man named Tristan Roberts. This action effectively rendered Britt not only homeless, but entirely penniless, stripping away the last vestiges of stability she possessed. One must ask, is Carly's action a necessary measure to protect her mother's legacy, or is it a vindictive strike against a woman she has never stopped despising? In my view, it is unequivocally the latter. Carly has always operated from a place of fierce, often blinding, tribal loyalty. If you are outside her circle, you are collateral damage. By changing those locks, Carly was not just securing a door, she was sending a definitive, crushing message that Britt does not belong, has never belonged, and will never be afforded the grace that Bobby so freely gave. When the inevitable confrontation between these two formidable women erupted, it was nothing short of explosive. Britt, understandably furious and cornered like a wounded animal, lashed out at the injustice of her sudden eviction. She was met, however, with an icy, unyielding wall of disdain. Carly's response was brutal in its directness, telling Britt to stop behaving as though the entire world owed her a debt, and demanding that she finally take responsibility for fixing her own disastrous life. There is perhaps a microscopic grain of truth in Carly's harsh assessment. Britt has a long history of self-sabotage and relying on the machinations of others. However, the delivery and timing of this brutal reality check lack any semblance of human empathy. To kick a woman when she is down, to strip her of her shelter and her finances in one fell swoop, and then to lecture her on entitlement is a staggering display of cruelty. It highlights a recurring flaw in Carly's character, her inability to recognize the suffering of those she deems unworthy of her sympathy. The psychological impact of this confrontation on Britt cannot be overstated. For a woman who has spent years trying to outrun the toxic legacy of her parents, Cesar Faison and Liesl Obrecht, and who has fought tooth and nail to carve out a legitimate, respectable life in Port Charles, this rejection is a fatal blow to her spirit. The realization that she is utterly alone, without resources, and despised by the very establishment of the town has pushed her past her breaking point. Following this devastating clash with Carly, Britt made a monumental and heartbreaking decision. She resolved to leave Port Charles forever. This is not a strategic retreat. It is a surrender. It is the desperate flight of a woman who believes there is nothing left for her but pain and humiliation in the town she once hoped to call home. As viewers who have watched Britt evolve from the manipulative Britch into a vulnerable, deeply flawed, but ultimately sympathetic woman, Her decision to flee feels like a tragic regression forced upon her by circumstances beyond her control. However, the universe of Port Charles rarely allows for a clean escape, and the introduction of Tristan Roberts into this volatile mix guarantees that Britt's nightmare is far from over. Tristan is not merely a new tenant filling an empty room, he is an interloper who has stumbled upon a ticking time bomb. According to the latest unfolding events, Tristan has discovered a deeply buried secret belonging to Britt, hidden right there in her former apartment. What could this secret be? Given Britt's complex history, the possibilities are as numerous as they are dangerous. Could it involve her past medical indiscretions? Could it be tied to the time she raised Rocco, a secret she is currently guarding with her life while on the run? Whatever the nature of this hidden truth, its discovery by a stranger introduces an entirely new, terrifying level of vulnerability for Britt. She is no longer just a homeless outcast. She is a woman whose darkest skeletons are now in the hands of an unknown entity. This revelation completely shifts the dynamic of the narrative. Britt's initial plan to simply fade away into obscurity and leave Port Charles behind is instantly thwarted by the agonizing realization that she is exposed. The psychological torment of knowing that Tristan holds a piece of her past that could potentially destroy her remaining shreds of dignity or freedom is a masterful stroke of dramatic storytelling. It forces Britt to pivot from a state of defeated flight to one of desperate, panicked defense. She cannot simply leave. She must neutralize the threat that Tristan poses. But how can a woman with no money, no home, and no allies possibly mount a defense against a man who holds all the cards? This is where the brilliance of the narrative structure truly shines, as it reintroduces a wild card that Carly likely never anticipated when she threw Britt out onto the street. Enter Jason Morgan. Jason's involvement in this escalating crisis is a fascinating and deeply satisfying development for longtime fans who remember the profound, albeit complicated, connection he shares with Britt. Jason has always operated according to his own strict internal moral code, one that often supersedes the petty squabbles and vindictive vendettas of those around him, including Carly. While Carly views Britt as a parasite to be discarded, Jason sees a woman in distress, someone he has cared for and who has, in her own way, stood by him in the past. The news that Jason is preparing to leave Port Charles for a few days with his son Danny adds a ticking clock to an already explosive situation. Time is of the essence, and Jason's impending departure means that whatever action needs to be taken must be swift, decisive, and effective. The alliance between Jason and Britt to investigate Tristan and uncover exactly what he knows and what his intentions are is a thrilling shift in momentum. It is a testament to Jason's unwavering loyalty that he would pause his own life and his precious time with Danny to aid a woman who has been systematically ostracized by his closest friend, Carly. This dynamic inherently creates a simmering, unspoken tension between Jason and Carly, highlighting the fundamental differences in how they view loyalty and forgiveness. Jason's willingness to step into the fray provides Britt with the one thing she desperately needed but could not find on her own: leverage. With Jason's unparalleled skills in investigation, intimidation, and strategic planning, Britt is no longer a helpless victim at the mercy of Tristan's discoveries. She suddenly has the most formidable protector in Port Charles standing by her side. As Jason and Britt delve deeper into Tristan's background and the exact nature of the secret he has uncovered, the stakes continue to rise exponentially. This is no longer just a dispute over an apartment. It is a high-stakes game of cat and mouse where the consequences of failure are catastrophic. If Tristan exposes Britt's secret, it could not only ruin her reputation permanently, but also endanger her current precarious situation as she attempts to navigate her complex relationship with Rocco. We know that Britt is ultimately pushed to go on the run with Rocco, fleeing from dangerous forces like Ross Cullum and Sonny's enforcer, Brick. It is entirely plausible, and indeed highly likely, that the fallout from Tristan's discovery is the very catalyst that forces Britt into that desperate, fugitive lifestyle. The loss of the apartment was the spark, but Tristan's blackmail or exposure is the explosion that shatters her world entirely. Watching Jason and Britt work together is a study in contrasting methodologies. Britt is driven by frantic anxiety, the raw fear of a woman who feels she has nothing left to lose but is terrified of losing it anyway. Jason, conversely, is the epitome of cold, calculated precision. He does not panic, he analyzes, he plans, and he executes. This partnership not only provides a thrilling investigative subplot, but also offers a poignant emotional core to the story. For a brief moment, amidst the chaos of homelessness and impending ruin, Britt is reminded that she is not entirely alone in the world. Jason's presence validates her worth in a way that Carly's cruel dismissal attempted to erase. It is a beautiful, subtle reminder that family in Port Charles is rarely defined by blood or legal documents. It is defined by who stands beside you when the rest of the world has locked you out. However, the looming shadow of Jason and Danny's impending trip adds a layer of melancholic urgency to the proceedings. Jason cannot stay and protect Britt indefinitely. He has responsibilities as a father, and his departure will inevitably leave Britt to face the final consequences of this ordeal on her own. This impending separation forces Britt to learn how to stand on her own 2 feet, to use the tools and information Jason helps her gather to finally fight her own battles. It is a harsh but necessary evolution for her character. She can no longer rely on the safety net of Bobby's apartment, nor can she permanently hide behind Jason's protective presence. She must confront Tristan, confront her own past, and ultimately decide what kind of life she is willing to fight for. Reflecting on this entire sequence of events, I am struck by the masterful way the writers have woven together themes of legacy, vengeance, and survival. Carly's actions, born out of a misguided sense of protective ownership over her mother's space, have inadvertently set off a chain reaction that threatens to consume everyone involved. By trying to erase Britt from Port Charles, Carly has only forced her into a corner where she must become more dangerous, more desperate, and more deeply entangled with Jason than ever before. It is a classic example of a self-fulfilling prophecy, where the attempt to eliminate a perceived threat only makes that threat more potent and unpredictable. Furthermore, the introduction of Tristan Roberts serves as a brilliant narrative device to externalize Britt's internal demons. The secret he holds is the physical manifestation of her past sins and regrets. In order to truly move forward, whether in Port Charles or far away from it, Britt must face this secret head on. The fact that she is forced to do so while stripped of her home and her dignity makes the struggle all the more compelling. It strips away the glamorous veneer of soap opera drama and replaces it with a raw, gritty tale of a woman fighting for her basic right to exist without the crushing weight of her past dragging her under.